Welcome to Cerebral Women in Paris Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. Years ago, after hearing an artist say art will save us, my intellectual curiosity was sparked, and I began a journey to understand exactly how. Through conversations with visual artists and the professionals who support them, I explore how art helps us see our history, our culture, our lives, and the experience of others in ways no other medium can. Capturing these voices is essential. They remind us of the power of art and the importance of noticing life's simple beauty. And now, here in Paris, a city that has long welcomed the daring, the dreamers, and the defiant, I continue these conversations where art breathes, questions, and reminds us that creation itself is an act of liberation. Welcome and enjoy Cerebral Women in Paris. This episode features Rosson Crow. Born in Dallas, Texas, she lives and works in Los Angeles, California. Rosson graduated from Yale University in New Haven after obtaining her MFA and from the School of Visual Arts in New York after obtaining her BFA. She was in residency at the prestigious Cité Internationale des Arts in Paris. Rosson is part of the emerging artist generation of the young contemporary arena, both in the U.S. and in Europe. Her work comprises immersive paintings, each steeped in a nostalgic atmosphere, with superimposed impressions and touching reminders of masterpiece films from the French New Wave, which she cites as one of her main artistic references. Rosson recognizes in these literary films themes that are important to her: the fundamentally ambivalent character of reality, memory, experiential confusion, and the multiple layers of interpretation that derive from them. By projecting this universe into a saturated future with psychedelic colors and invasive ornamentations, she navigates between utopia and dystopia at a time when the planet is threatened by our massive overconsumption. She once said, in a way, the paintings are about the collective hubris of humanity, our bad behavior, inheriting a dream world and destroying it. Rosson's work has been featured in important solo exhibitions throughout the United States and Europe, and she has a strong presence in prestigious public and private collections. Rosson has been represented by La Galerie Nathalie Obadia in Paris and Brussels since 2005. Enjoy this episode featuring Rosson Crow and visit cerebralwomen.com for her impressive and expanded bio. Rosson, welcome to Cerebral Women Art Talks in Paris. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
My first question always is, when did you recognize your love for the visual arts?
I think I realized that I was an artist pretty young. I was always a creative child, very imaginative, drawing, painting, playing dress up, and I just always loved art. My mother was an interior designer, and she was very creative. So I think that I kind of grew up in a creative household with her and all the arts and crafts and projects and things that she was always working on and doing. Our house always felt very visual and curated in a sense. And I think I just learned to express myself visually, both in creating things, but, as I got older in high school, the way I dressed, the way I dyed my hair crazy colors or wore wigs or wore costumes and vintage clothes, I just always loved it. And then when I was in high school, that's when I started to kind of get more serious about art and thinking, hey, potentially maybe this is a career that I can explore and make something out of it. So I was pretty young.
So during that period of exploration, was there a particular artist that you began to have strong interest in that really influenced you?
Funnily enough, I think when I was in high school, one of the artists that I really gravitated towards was Andy Warhol. And, of course, he's a very famous artist and, maybe not so niche or something that you would be interested in Andy Warhol. But I guess, just the pop art sensibility, there's a lot of play with his work that I really loved. I loved the idea that he created this whole world around him with the factory and all of these misfit artists that he drew together in New York and that world. I was very fascinated with Edie Sedgwick at the time. I remember reading the biography of Edie Sedgwick when I was 16 and just being like, oh my God, what a dream. I want to move to New York and live this bohemian artistic life, because I was just a girl in the suburbs of Dallas, and it felt very conservative and restrictive and traditional in a way that I was wanting to rebel against as a teenager growing up in the suburbs, which is a little cliche, but true. And so I think just this romantic vision of New York, the New York art world in the 70s and 80s, and Andy Warhol and what he represented was kind of a touchstone for me.
So how do you define your practice?
I mean, I generally just say that I'm a painter, sometimes an artist, but mostly a painter. But over the past, I would say 10 years or so, I've kind of tried to stretch my artistic pursuits and include writing. I've been doing screenwriting. I made a short film. So there are other things I try and experiment with, but mostly I'm a painter. I would say that my practice is an exploration of history, memory and misremembering in a way, events and time periods layered onto one another. I'm interested in exploring ideas of destabilization, things melting and morphing into each other, the slippage of reality, how it feels to be alive right now, at least for me, but also how it might have felt to be alive in a different time period. And I think I've always been interested in that. And that's where my love of history comes from.
Do you ever look at your work, evaluate yourself, and see how Andy Warhol and the pop art, how that world has influenced the work you do now?
You know, it's interesting because I really love that you asked that question about what artists influenced me at the time of when I first started taking art seriously, because I don't think that much about Andy Warhol's work in relation to mine now. But I think that just speaking about it now, I mean, clearly I have been influenced by him and pop art, especially because I love pop culture and pop culture references and including those in my work. And I think that that's definitely in there. The color, the play, even more recently in my work where I've experimented with a technique of using elements of photo transfer, which we can discuss more later, but just this idea of playing with mechanical reproduction versus the painterly hand, I think kind of goes back to early pop art. So yeah, it's definitely there.
Let's talk about your technique and how it has changed over the years.
Recently, as I mentioned, I've experimented more with photo transfer and collage elements in the paintings. Prior to that, I have always used photographic sources for my paintings. I love photography. I love collecting images and creating collages and using those as source materials for the paintings. And more recently, I've kind of spent more time on creating collages to start the paintings. And the collages are created from hundreds of source images. So I collect vintage postcards from the 1930s through 1950s. I have old magazines I'm taking elements from. I have photos that I've taken on my various road trips and historical research trips. And I pull from all these elements and create collages they're kind of mock-ups of the paintings of these interior spaces or landscapes. And I do the collages both by hand and on the computer in Photoshop. So it's a little bit of back and forth between that. Again, the mechanical versus the artist hand, I think is an interesting thing that I'm working through. And then when I am ready to start the painting on the physical canvas, I usually start working on the canvas with abstract poured acrylic underpainting. So again, going back and forth between a collage, which is, if this is what I want the painting to look like, it's a more fixed image. Then when I start the painting, I start with a very abstract, loose board acrylic underpainting, very abstract. Then I take elements from the collage and I print parts of them and use a technique of photo transfer onto the canvas, so onto the underpainting. So this technique allows you to transfer the ink from the paper, but not the paper itself. So it's not collage. And when doing this, I only print layers of color from the collage. So it's almost like screen printing by hand, which I then build up layers on the canvas using more acrylic underpainting between the layers. So I really love the DIY elements of it. There's a lot of chance and mistakes that can happen, which I really like, but you also kind of have this element of the photographic reproduction mixed with the more loose artistic elements of the underpainting, the mistakes, the doubling, the layering, things of that nature. And then once all the layers of the transfer and underpainting are complete, which is generally 4 to 6 layers, then I paint over the entire thing in oil. So it goes through many stages of image creation and destruction in a way, like creating an image, breaking it down, creating an image, breaking it down. I start with a collage, but it ends up being very different at the end, which I love because it allows for a lot of chance and play and the artist's hand to come in.
So during the process, when do you decide on the dominant color?
That happens pretty early on. And I know you had a question about, how do you choose color? For me, it's very intuitive. I don't know. When I'm thinking of an image and I'm starting to work on the collage, the colors just kind of come to me. I will say when I'm working on a show and I have a few paintings accumulated and, I have this blue painting or a pink painting, then I start to think, okay, well, what's going to balance that out? If I have this blue painting, what do I envision next to it? Do I want another blue painting or do I want an orange painting? So then it starts to be dictated a little bit about the show and the body of work as a whole and what kind of goes together.
So you said your mother was into interior design?
Yes.
Are your experiences as a child, as a young person, reflected in the work?
Probably. I think that, I would say that growing up with a mother who is an interior designer and a very creative person, it's not lost on me that most of my paintings are of interior spaces. And so clearly that had a big impact on me. And I think the value of space and the way that space is dictated and treated and created and curated, I think that had a big impact on me and my work.
So when do you know her work is finished?
I think that you just know. It just is a feeling where I have, okay, it's done. Once I feel a work is finished, then it's really done. And I let it dry and I never go back and work on a painting once it's dry. It's almost like it's hermetically sealed in amber or something while the paint dries. That's what it is. That's the experience. That's the time period that's captured, including all the little mistakes and things that sometimes I come back and look a week or two later. Oh, maybe that should have, kind of been a different color there. That's not quite right. But I think that's all part of it. That's all part of the experience. And I don't like things to be too fussy. I like there to be a looseness and a play. And once they're done, they're done.
And when do the titles enter the creative process?
That depends. I think that sometimes I have had experiences where I will come up with a title before I even come up with an image for the painting or thinking about what I want to paint. Oh, that's a great title. I have a list of titles that I keep. And so sometimes a title will hit me and be like, wow, that's a really good idea. So, and you can kind of start imagining what the painting might be based on that title alone. That's always really fun. But other times, most of the time, I would say that I'm working on a painting and the title will come to me while I'm working on it, usually from maybe a feeling I'm trying to convey in the work or a sensibility or a great sentence from an audiobook I'm listening to while I'm working on the painting, which oftentimes comes to feel related to the work. So that's kind of how the titles come to be.
If you weren't a visual artist, what other career path do you think you would have chosen?
100% barrel racer in the rodeo. I was a horse girl growing up, kind of before I really got into art. I've always loved animals, grew up in Texas, loved riding horses. And there is this moment in my life where it's almost like a split could have happened, where I could have chosen a different life path. I could have gone the life of horseback riding and living on a farm and being in the rodeo circuit. And I honestly think being a rodeo queen would be incredible. I mean, the outfits, the horseback riding, the athleticism, it's a world that I'm very fascinated with. So I think barrel racer in the rodeo.
So how do you keep learning?
Oh, this is a great question, because I think it's so important. Like you were saying, you have to keep yourself engaged and keep learning. And I think it's really important to leading a fulfilled creative life. I keep learning by trying to expand my creative practice. I mentioned that I've been writing things, and learning how to screenwrite specifically has been really fulfilling for me. Very challenging, very frustrating at times. I find writing to be immensely challenging, but really satisfying also at the same time. I always have really admired writers. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of audiobooks while I'm working. And I think I always thought of writers as being like maybe this ultimate creative expression, but that I could never do it. I don't know how people write novels. I mean, I still don't know how people write novels. I haven't gotten that far yet, but I just have always been so enamored and amazed by writers. And during the pandemic, I decided to take an online screenwriting class and totally fell in love with it. I started exploring screenwriting as an extension of my artistic practice because I have always been interested in filmmaking, always wanted to make a film and kind of translate my artistic vision into film. Also, with all of my work, there is an element of narrative to it. When I put on a show, each painting is like a short story, and the show is a collection of stories, but they're all tied together somehow. And so I decided, well, maybe I'm going to try it. Maybe I'm sure I'll be terrible at it at first, but maybe it'll be really fun. And it's been great. I love writing so much. And like I said, it's a really great challenge for me. So that's one way I keep learning.
So let's go back in time. How do you feel your art professors impacted your practice?
I have to say that when I think of my various art professors and how they've impacted my practice, I have to go back to my high school art history teacher, Douglas Derricott, who is the reason that I took myself seriously as an artist. He's a really big part of that because he saw in me something serious as an artist. And he was the one who really encouraged me to go to art school in New York, which I don't know if I even thought was possible before that. As a 17-year-old girl in Dallas, nobody really moves to New York and goes to art school in my high school. And he really encouraged it and said, no, you can do it. It'd be amazing for you. And so I applied to School of Visual Arts and got in, and my parents let me move to New York. And I don't know if I would be where I am without that encouragement. And so I think about that often, and how important these early teachers are in our lives and how they can really impact us in these incredibly positive ways. And then through School of Visual Arts and at Yale, I had such incredible teachers: Peter Haley, Mel Bachner, Cecily Brown, Marilyn Minter. I mean, just incredible, incredible people who really taught me ways to take my work seriously, to take my practice seriously, to keep showing up for my work, which is really the ultimate struggle that an artist has in life, is that you have to keep doing it, And so, yeah, they taught me how to think critically about my work, how to discuss it, to keep pushing things, to keep showing up.
And when you're working, do you think about your audience?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I want my paintings to be something captivating for people, engaging, hopefully enjoyable, that they're drawn into the world that I'm creating and they want to step into the paintings and experience them. Oftentimes, I feel like I'm creating these large-scale sets that I want people to be able to enter and experience, because the paintings are of spaces, of interiors, of landscapes, but they're devoid of figures. So often I think of the viewer as the figure who can enter the work, because my work is large scale, it's immersive, and I hope that the viewer is drawn into the world and wants to enter and experience it.
Share with us, what are you excited about right now?
Well, I'm excited about getting back in the studio after this show with Natalie, which you saw in Paris. I taken a few months kind of away from the studio, so I'm excited to get back in the studio. I'm going to be creating some paintings for Art Basel Miami for Natalie this December. I'm going to be creating a new show for my New York gallery, Miles McHenry, for spring of 2027. So I'm excited to get to work on that and really excavate what the show is about. I have no idea right now, but once we get into the sandbox and start playing, hopefully it will reveal itself. I'm very excited about a script that I just finished the first draft on, which is set in Constantinople in 536 AD. It's kind of like a zany, lighthearted romp in the Byzantine Empire. So writing gives me some creative freedom to explore other historical worlds. But maybe the Byzantine Empire will come into my next body of work. You never know. So I'm very into the Byzantine Empire right now. It's just a very fascinating world. So I'm excited about that. Keeping the creativity flowing.
Yeah, I love the freedom that artists have in creating work.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that one of your questions was, what do I enjoy most about my practice? And I just thought immediately freedom, creative freedom. I feel so fortunate to be able to play, to be able to create these worlds by myself for people to hopefully enjoy and experience. And so fortunate to be able to share that. So it's not lost on me. I appreciate it so much.
So what do you feel is the purpose of art?
It's a big question. Well, let's see. I mean, I feel like there's many purposes of art, right? I feel like it can enlighten, it can enrapture, it can captivate us, it can engage us, it can make you see things in a different way, challenge you. But I think it can also delight and enchant. But I think that maybe ultimately the purpose of art is to express our humanity and just show the various ways that we're human and we're all processing this crazy journey of life in different and radical ways. And I think that's what's very interesting about AI and its use in art, because I think that that's what AI can never do. It can never be human. And so much of AI seems to be erasing our humanity. It's interesting that we're trying to erase ourselves. I don't know why, because why do we want these machines to do things that humans can do and express humanity through?
I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate the ability for me to envision you on a rodeo horse. But I could see where it would be very enjoyable, because the relationship that you establish or build with the animal, with the horse.
I mean, yeah, the physicalities between horse riding and painting are obviously different, but there is a certain physicality to the painting, especially my very large scale works and kind of managing that. And I don't know, maybe there's a relation to somewhere in there.
This is the last question. How do you want your art to impact the way people think?
With my recent exhibition at Natalie Obadia, the show is probably my most personal show to date. It was about my mother passing and my experience of processing that grief and going through that experience, which happened while I was creating the show. And then I ended up making almost an entirely new body of work because after my mother passed away, I found that I was a totally different person. And what I wanted to say was completely different. And what I was experiencing as an artist was completely different. And I needed to process this grief through making this body of work. So the paintings are immensely personal, and there is a deep sadness to some of the work. But it was very important to me that I was also portraying the hope that comes out of these immense ruptures in our life. That's why I called the exhibition La Rupture. This idea of something cracking open, immense break, the most destabilizing event that I had experienced in my life. Exploring, yes, both that pain and that deep grief, but also the beauty and regrowth that started to come after it. And a lot of my work deals with history and sometimes the dark side of history and some kind of destabilizing and chaotic elements. But I think it's important to also portray, like I said, the hope and that there is a positive future that can come out of it. So that's, I hope, what people can take away from my work.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I've enjoyed this very much.
Thank you, Phyllis. I have too.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.